You're listening to Redesigning Reality with Dylan Charles and Jeff Anthony.
Seriously, though, this is Redesigning Reality, the podcast. I am chilling in my studio in fabulous North Carolina on the horn with my good bud Jeff Anthony, who's all the way in fucking Oregon. Jeff, what up?
What up? Fucking Oregon. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Eugene, Oregon.
Eugene. What kind of a name is Eugene? It's like just some dude's name.
It is. Actually, it is a guy's name. And originally, this was like, mining town or something. It used to be called Eugene's Mud Hole. It's literally named after a guy, Eugene something. I can't remember his last name, but I thought it was funny. It was called Eugene's Mud Hole.
Get the fuck out of here, for real. Mud hole?
Yeah, it was. Before it was like a established city and stuff. Everybody referred to it probably in like the trapping days, when they were trapping
Fur
all the
trapping. Yeah, when they were killing off the buffalo and running the Indians off the land.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I lived in Washington State for a good year, and it's amazing up there on the Pacific Northwest.
It's beautiful.
My perception of back at that time, I was doing a lot of firearms training. I was teaching rifle marksmanship, so I was traveling to different ranges in like Washington State and Wyoming, Idaho, and Oregon and stuff, and working with people teaching these 2-day and 5-day shooting clinics, rifle marksmanship clinics. And my perception of Oregon was that there's a lot of crazy people in Oregon.
There are a lot of crazy people in Oregon. Aren't there a lot of crazy people everywhere, though? It's kind of been my experience, I guess. I knew a lot of crazy people in Costa Rica. Definitely know a lot of crazy Texans.
Okay, you're right. There's different vibes of crazy. And so I have family in Northern California up in Humboldt, so I've spent a lot of time in that area. Freaking amazing. But that whole region, like Northern California up through Oregon, like really up to close to Portland, really, there's like a different type of breed. It's almost like this, Hank Williams Jr. comes to mind.
That's funny. That's funny because, I think people think there's a lot of rednecks here. But somebody said that to me. They're like, dude, there's a redneck over there. And I was like, dude, I'm from Texas. You guys don't know what a redneck is. It's like some pretty sophisticated rednecks in this area, I would say. So
there are, man. Yeah, there's some.
Yeah, well-informed rednecks, I guess. Political, well-informed rednecks.
Well-armed rednecks.
Yeah, true that too. Yeah. And it's funny because it is such a Oregon's a it's a paradox. I
was going to say that same thing.
It's like legal weed and super liberal, but at the same time, I got my fucking guns and my, So anyway, it's kind of maybe a great example for what the world should be. Like in Oregon now, you can be gender X, and it's kind of like whatever, do what the fuck you want to do. I don't care.
Sort of, but it's a paradox also in the way that there's a lot of I mean, the term militia is thrown around a lot, but there's a lot of well-armed people who believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the founding message of the America. But at the same time, it's also one of those. So there's a lot of liberty-oriented, liberty-minded people in Oregon and really that whole area, Northern California. But at the same time, there's Oregon's one of those places where they're testing out like taxing schemes, tracking everybody's cars, taxing them per the mile. So it seems kind of that perfect dichotomy of where we're really at. I mean, a lot of people really want freedom, but it's really not happening.
Right.
It's just not happening.
Yeah, I remember when I moved here, when I called to get my insurance, State Farm was like, yeah, so we're gonna put this tracking device in your car. And yeah, the fewer miles you drive, the less your deductible and the less your actual monthly payment's going to be. And then the more you drive, the higher, percentage you have of having an accident. And then so the higher your deductible and the higher your monthly payment would be. And I was like, yeah, no, not doing that. You're not putting a tracking device in my car. And they seemed like off put that I said no, and I ended up just not even. I've been with State Farm since I was like 16, and I ended up just going with a different company because I was like, dude, no. And they were like, well,
that's interesting because I know the state is experimenting with this. I don't think it's been rolled out yet. But you would be required, like when you go to the DMV to get your plates, you would be required to get some sort of transponder, directly from the government. But you're saying that State Farm is issuing these to their clients already right now? Wow.
Yes, in Oregon. I'd never heard of it.
Wow.
Well, I've been out of the States for 10 years, so who knows? And they, it's under the guise of saving you money kind of thing. Well, unless you drive and I'm like, well, shouldn't I have the same insurance no matter what I'm doing? You guys aren't making it free for the year when nothing happens. They don't say, hey, here's all your money back. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's fucked up too, right?
Well, when I say it's funny, I don't mean laughable.
Okay. I mean, it is laughable. It's laughable to me, like what people will tolerate and go with, and but literally a device that you put inside your car or a company or whatever, just on the sake of with the convenience, I guess, of saving you money, like you'll allow somebody that much intrusion into your life. It's crazy to me. Right. But when I think about that too, it reminds me of this whole, like where technology is really taking us, because we have, take the stock market. That's like the big example I'm thinking of, is the way that trading works on the stock market now. It's all done high frequency trading with computer algorithms. So these big brokerage firms and whatnot, they write code. They write little bits of code that go in there and do this stuff. So there's no person sitting there thinking about what's happening and analyzing it. No, all that's being done by AI, machine learning, basically. So, we're depending more and more on these algorithms to run and control every aspect of our life, and it's always, pushed out under the terms of saving us time or money, and it's pretty crazy. How much control are we actually going to give mathematics,
well, it's
like electricity over our lives? It's fucking crazy.
I guess during the Super Bowl and on television, they're trying to get everybody. Amazon, the beast from the jungle, is trying to get in everybody's home with Alexa. They're like, Alexa, Alexa, Alexa. There's all these commercials. And, dude, like, to me, that's insane. You're going to put a listening device for Amazon to listen to every single conversation, everything that's going on in your home. And now they have the ones with the cameras, too.
Oh, yeah.
And it's sold to you so that you can watch what's going on in your house. Oh, look, you can see your little pets over there. It's so weird, dude. And so then this last week, this was all over the news that Alexa was like laughing at people. Like, ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, dude, they're laughing at you because you're a freaking moron that you put that in your house, and it's the evil. We got you now. We know what you're talking about. We know where you're going. We know what you're doing. We even know what's on your grocery list.
See, I split the U.S. in 2009, right? So a few years after you, and a lot of this kind of stuff was coming online, and I felt like I just needed to like decompress from the States, I guess. I thought it was really cool to live out my dream that I'd had since I was a kid of living in the tropics, and speaking some foreign language, which had always been a dream of mine. And so when I went away, I came back and I was visiting after probably being there 5 or 6 years, and the whole world was looking totally different for me. But I came back and I was spending time with my sister-in-law in Dallas, Texas, and it's if you're out there and Dallas, Texas, especially North Dallas, it's very cookie cutter. Like everything's a homeowners association. All the houses have to be the same color brick, the same color roofs. The yards all have to look the same. The streets are all perfectly ordered with stoplights. Everything's timed. It's a fucking machine. It's crazy. And you get out of that and live in the organic countryside of Costa Rica for 7 years, and that shit is really crazy. But I was going around and finding out that every time I went to a grocery store or a pharmacy or a shoe store, anyone, everybody wanted to sign me up for. Everybody wanted my phone number, which I didn't have a phone.
Yeah.
And to sign me up for some rewards program, and that when I do, every purchase that I make is obviously fed into like the big data aspect of commerce nowadays. And I always thought that was fucking crazy. So I was talking to my sister-in-law about it, and she loves it. Like she loves it, man. She like the whole lifestyle, everything is just fucking awesome to her. Like everything is regimented, everything is taken care of, everything is in order, everything works. Like everything is at your fingertips. and like there's discounts for the stuff that you need when you need it. It's all right in front of your face. And so she told me, she was like, yeah, I can't wait till they do away with cash. Like, I don't even want to fuck with cash. Like, I just want to be able to walk in and like wave a magic wand and get whatever I want. And, you know, Amazon's making these stores right now where you can, you know, basically walk in and it RFID scans you as you walk in. Everything you pick up, it automatically charges. You don't even talk to another person.
Right.
And so, but the point is that there's a lot of people out there who are really, you know, living this way, and really, you know, she posted just recently about having Alexa in their house, and like, her son asked Alexa what a dreidel was. It was over the holidays, and Alexa replied with like a clip from South Park singing dreidel, dreidel. I mean, how stupid is that to let, you know, a machine tied into Google, you know, teach your kids? But the point is that there's a lot of people that are really into this. And my old perspective was kind of like, these people are just fucking crazy and turned off sheep. But now there's something else to it, man.
Well, there is something else to it, and people think it's they're living the dream, living the tech dream that they were sold through sci-fi and all this stuff. But on a whole nother level, what's scary to me about, speaking of having Alexa in your house, and did you see the new? So the new thing with YouTube, the CEO of YouTube just came out and said that they're going to have links next to videos that they flag as conspiratorial, right? So any video that they flag as a conspiracy theory type video, they're going to have links to Wikipedia to debunk the video on the same, you know, on the page right there in the description. And the funny thing to me is, even if you go to Wikipedia's website, Wikipedia says that they are not a bastion of information that anyone, and you know this, dude, my 9-year-old son can get on Wikipedia and start adding content to something about, you know, anything, right? And so it's all it's a peer-reviewed encyclopedia of uneducated peers, you know, and that it's a funny thing that's going on right now. There's this guy, he's a psychology professor from University of Toronto. All these people are all up in arms about him saying things like there's
Jordan
only
Peterson.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And saying things like there's only two genders, and that, you know, things are offensive and all that. And, you know, he's coming out and saying, hey, look, if you can't. And the thing that I don't understand, I know I'm all kind of all over the place right now, but
crazy
I'm
going off.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit to what him saying, you know, if you're 18 years old, 6 years ago, you were 12. And yet at all these universities across the United States and Canada, they're getting all these 18-year-old kids to protest and to try to change giant systems when they're not even capable of cleaning their own rooms. And he was just trying to say, you know, get some education, get some experience, get your own life in order, and then go out and try to change something small instead of these huge systems that even grown-ups in their 50s and 60s who have been supposedly in order for decades can't even change, you know, and are having trouble with and stuff. So I don't understand where all this is at with people. I understand his perspective. I really do, as a, you know, as a 43, almost 44-year-old man, and having children of my own, and realizing that, you know, your life is a reflection of, you know, the way you keep your home and the way you keep your things is kind of reflected to the outside world. So if you live in chaos, then you're just a walking bundle of chaos. So, and everybody wants to be heard. And I understand that as well. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be heard, but I kind of agree with him. Like, you don't know necessarily the issues. You just take some hot button topic and then you start applying your opinion to it. And it's kind of dangerous.
It's very dangerous. The golden hordes of dumbed down zombie children. They're out there.
Oh,
Jordan. But what's cool about Jordan Peterson, though, is if you notice, like, there's two things I really like about him. One is he likes to face truth, like face reality. Like, he doesn't sugarcoat shit. He looks at shit and says, hey, this is really what's going on.
Right.
Another thing I find fascinating about him is he's, in a very short time, he's, you know, there was those original videos of him at the University of Toronto, whatever university he's at, and he's literally just trying to talk, and these young students, these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids are screaming at him. And he's basically like, look how ridiculous you are. But what I like about him is that like in that short period of time, it's really only been a year and a half, 2 years or something, but he's everywhere. I mean, he's doing like super big talk shows, mainstream shows, and all over the place.
He was on Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan, I even think I heard him on like Glenn Beck and like that level, and doing like Good Morning America, this kind of stuff. He's all over the freaking place. But like the fact that like one individual voice can have such a quick meteoric rise to popularity really tells you that there's something else going on that's really positive and really really hopeful with society that doesn't really get as much airtime as the young kids, the fifth column of college students out there destroying things and screaming at people and having snowflake meltdowns, as they call them.
Snowflake. That's a funny term. Snowflakes.
Snowflakes.
But it's relevant. They melt down over every little tiny thing, and it's kind of funny. It actually is comical and funny when you're watching the videos of them screaming at him, and he's trying to have an intellectual conversation. And like I said, everybody deserves to be heard, but nobody deserves to be screamed at. And and some of the funny things are like this organized walking out of school thing, like all these people from elementary school, from elementary through college. I'm like, dude, what are elementary kids No. And who's going to be trying to get my 9-year-old to walk out of school, and then I don't know where he is? Like,
that's
what
happening.
are y'all doing, man? That sounds like the most, dude, we're just scraping the bottom with some of that.
You had mentioned the whole YouTube flag. I mean, literally, YouTube's going to go in now after literally kicking off, like booting. They booted Waking Times, my website. They booted us off of YouTube for no reason. And I had interviews that I'd done, original interviews with really interesting people, and they just pulled the plug. I appealed, and the robot replied, "Sorry, your appeal has been denied. Go fuck off." And so, but they're kicking off lots of like more well-known, bigger sites. I'm not going to name names because there's literally lots of them. And now, they've hired literally armies of like thousands and thousands of people to go in and flag content and review. Like what, like. Now, then they're going to decide that there's an idea that's a theory or conspiracy theory that they don't like, and so they're going to debunk it in real time. I mean, the fact that they're doing this, and the fact that there's this whole social justice warrior movement, it tells you there's really a lot of delusion happening in our world today. And I think that the cool part about that is it's going to drive people back to where they need to be anyway, which is in independent sources, finding their own unique niches where they really fit in, where their ideas really make sense, and they can play with their own realities in a sense, instead of this mainline ghetto-ish, corporate ghetto-ish, everybody's in the same forum that's overtly being regulated by some wannabe Big Brother type figure. So that's why doing this stuff like what we're doing, there's a lot of like people doing this kind of stuff right now, like doing their own thing. I mean, really, like, okay, so maybe you won't be able to find us on YouTube at some point, but if you want the message, you'll find the message. Right. 25 years ago, when the conspiracy stuff was still really underground, like people had to find this information. Like people would have like seminars or get-togethers in their like meetups in their city. People would have like underground radio stations. They'd be like doing what we're doing, but doing it on ham radio, right? When the internet first started, you first started to be able to stream. People were doing this stuff. On AM stations, and they were sending out private newsletters where they manage the news lists by hand and notebooks at home. And it's just like, I mean, if you believe in the history, or if you want to believe in the story of the history of the U.S., I mean, the whole revolution there was the same thing. It was like, this stupid monarchical clampdown on individual liberty, and so what does that do? It forces people to get creative and find new ways of doing things. So I kind of see it as good that all of this is happening with YouTube and all this, because they're not even like, they're like in your face. Yeah, Wikipedia is bullshit. Snopes is run by some like like some lame ass.
Snopes is having to retract statements that they have put out as truth. Yeah.
But that's the point. I mean, the more people try to control shit, the less controllable shit becomes.
Absolutely, because people start to like you said, people start to unify and come together and realize that there's a kitties make an appearance in the video now.
Meow. What's up, kitty kitty? Meow.
So, yeah, people start to realize that it's all a control system. And the only way to get out of a control system is to find your own group of like-minded people that are truth seekers, right?
Yeah, just people that push you in the, like a healthy direction of growth versus containment,
Right, and that's what people are seeking right now. That's what people are after. They want progress, and we haven't. With the exception of technology, we seem very stagnant right now in the world. We don't seem to be progressing, and we're locked in these old ways. And it's really amazing to me how many people are informed now because of technology. But just because you have information and you can go be a Twitter troll doesn't mean you're a justice warrior. You're like, that whole term, social justice warrior. Just because you gave something a thumbs up or a little crybaby face, you're not inspiring change in the world because you did that. And that's the thing that I'm ready for and that I would like to see. And that's part of what, we put a lot of work and production and thought into trying to do a show to inspire and motivate people to redesign their reality and to change their way of thinking. And, we're not just sitting there putting an angry face.
Angry emoji, a turd emoji, like a smiling, steaming pile of brown dookie emoji.
This is doo-doo.
Oh my God, that blows my mind. It's so easy. It would be so easy to sit here and talk about all the shit that drives you crazy, that doesn't make sense, that is fucked up. And this is actually a good conversation to have because, what is it that we're really trying to do here? What is it that redesigning reality is all about? And man, I like the rise of Jordan Peterson tells you something. It's confirmation of what you just said a second ago, that people are really looking for truth, like what really rings true, and they're not finding it in YouTube anymore. They're not going to find it on Facebook because Facebook doesn't want that information to be seen out there. But man, it's human nature. We for the most part, people are, they gravitate towards truth and understanding and greater awareness of what life means and what it's about, and greater understanding of how our actions and thoughts affect the world around us. And so when you're not getting that, you become starved and bereft and hungry, essentially. And how your actions and thoughts relate to you too, and what that causes. Dude, think of all the neurotransmitters and all the freaking hormones that you're releasing in your own body with just the power of thought, because you allow yourself to think of something that makes you happy or something that makes you feel sad or depressed. You're on this dopamine, cortisol freight train, of electromagnetic freight train.
Yeah,
resonating.
And it does. Yeah, it resonates out. But it resonates through your body first, right? So all of that's passing through all of your organs and your heart and your chakras and all these things. And, you can make fun of all that and you can think it's woo-woo,
You're missing out, though.
Absolutely, because it's absolute. And that's what I think is on the horizon. I think we're getting to a point where people are going to realize that the woo-woo is what you should do, and the
woo-woo is what you should do. I don't know, maybe some hybrid of.
Well, yeah, I think there's a balance there. I don't think Jordan Peterson is woo-woo. I think he's educated and intelligent, and one of the things that he's trying to say is, look, if you identify yourself as this thing or that thing, I'm not here to insult you. If you tell me that your name is, you were born Bill, but your name's now Catherine, and you present yourself as Catherine in my class, I'll address you as Catherine. I'm not here to offend people. I'm just trying to say that's still, somebody's choice, and it's still a gender thing. It's like they're not some third gender. They're now a female or whatever. So it's an interesting place. It's an interesting time. I think that it's and it represents personal, spiritual, and worldly growth, as far as I can see.
See, I think that everybody has, some destiny that they're supposed to fulfill, some purpose. There's a passion that people have that once they figure out what it is, that excites them, that really gets them going, like it awakens like the spirit and also the mind. And so a big part of that is looking at what is and facing the reality of what is. And everybody's affected by different things in different ways. I listened to this interesting speech the other day by a spiritual teacher. It was a TED Talk, and she's really, really focused on one or two particular issues and ridiculously passionate about, these one or two, these couple of very specific issues. And so when I watch the presentation, I'm thinking, wow, like, okay, there's a person fighting for that. Okay, that we're covered. She's on this, right? She's mobilizing her army on this. You know what I'm saying? And there's so many of us, and there's so many possibilities. But everybody's drawn to different things and passionate about different things. And on the same token is that everybody's afraid of different things, and everybody's concerned about different things. And so the first part in all this is really, facing the reality of what is. And so, I had a conversation, I did an interview with a woman who runs she's a gardener, and she runs a business where they, teach people how to garden and grow their own food and make medicines out of food and whatnot. And so I asked her, I said, well, how did you get into this? And she basically found her passion by what inspired her to actually pursue, to acknowledge and pursue her passion was the realization that the world was fucked up and America was bankrupt and that economic collapse is coming at some point. I mean, it just has to. And the reality of what happens to people during economic collapse is they need food. Like that's what goes first, is the food systems fall out of place. And so, so a fear, and looking, deeply at this fear and studying it a bit and really understanding how the economy works, how the fiat system works, understanding, the amount of debt that we're taking on, where all this money's actually going, how government spends our money and all this stuff, very real concrete issues. What ultimately happened was it awoken within her a latent passion, which was for working with food, teaching people, learning how to be a healer through using natural foods and medicines, which is fucking awesome. So that's kind of, to me, like really what redesigning reality is about. It's about, looking at the world, through your own lens, through your own glasses and figuring out what it is that inspires you or awakens your passion, and a negative passion and a positive passion, and understanding and looking at the world and taking in as much as you need to take in to realize that, yes, indeed, it's a reality, that's part of the world, and then transmuting that and turning that into energy to drive yourself to addressing that problem in your own unique way through finding and pursuing your passion.
Right. And I totally agree with all that. But I would also add to that, you have to find your truth, right? Nobody can tell you what your truth is.
Right.
You can find the things that resonate with you, right? There's always that aspect of, hey, this person's truth resonates with me. So, hey, that's a piece of my truth as well. But ultimately, I can't tell anyone out there what your truth is. I can't say, hey, this is it. This is how it is. Because it's never cut and dry. It's never nothing is how it is other than death, I'm guessing. Because I haven't done that yet either. But hey, that's pretty finite. And that seems to be how it is. You're no longer on this plane anyway. And so, I would encourage people, find your truth and don't go out there like Jordan Peterson's saying, don't go out there and start screaming at people and holding up signs. And if you haven't organized and orientated yourself to know what your truth even is, right? Like if you're still confused on an issue, then you shouldn't be combating that said issue, right? And it's interesting, the lady you're talking about, it goes along. You said she realized that this system was bankrupt or broken, and that goes right along with the message that we're constantly putting out there is, hey, look, crisis and challenge pushes you to be to change, right? It's like how many times have I said you got to squeeze the oranges to get the juice, baby? And it's so true. It's when people come against these personal crisis and personal development happens, and it's really interesting. So, getting out of your comfort zone is and exposing yourself, because I think that's what we're talking about, exposing yourself to the dark side. Like, how many videos and articles and news reports I've watched that I'm like, oh man, I don't really like how this makes me feel. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, this is the reality of what's happening in the world. So I take in the information and I do with it what I need to do. And then I find my piece of truth, or, my kind of positive spin I can put on it, and how I can try to change these situations by, if nothing else, educating my children on better ways to be in the world.
Yeah, finding your truth, that's a cool way to put that. I like that.
Well, it's super important, and so many people haven't done that, right? And they're still curious, and it is what it is. It's like you said, it's just this thing that is. And one of the great teachers in my life, a mentor I had, he used to call this the isness of the ofness, right? And we're all of this thing that is. And I love the way he put that.
Sounds like Dr. Seuss.
Right, but it's so true. I mean, he's what they would call like a seer, right? Like he can pierce through things and see things in people, and see things in culture and society that are happening currently, or that are on the verge of happening. So almost like a soothsayer. Really interesting wizard-like guy. Shout out to Don McDougall.
Yo, Don.
Yo.
This one's for you. Da, 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 da.
Well, then he took me through some of the most painful and hard experiences of my life, right? Because he's the guy that he's all about addressing the shadow and like shadow workshop stuff, and looking at the ugly stuff in your life that you try to turn your back on and think, oh, I'm over that, but you really aren't, because you just don't address it. And avoidance, I would say this to our listeners too, avoidance of an issue or a problem is only going to build that problem. It's only going to make it stronger and more something that you try to steer around. But at some point, it gets so big, like, how are you going to get around this thing? It becomes the elephant in the room, and you have to address it. And it's better just to, it is what it is. It's the isness of the ofness, as Don would say.
Yeah. Like spirituality has, like when I hear the term by itself, it kind of like niches down into this one specific thing. And it feels like this sort of contemporary way of finding a nice warm blanket to wrap yourself in to avoid a lot of the really nasty shit that's going on in the world, and therefore not participate. And I think that shortchanges you, and also shortchanges spirituality. But there's another level to the process of awakening, in that, sure, it's a spiritual awakening, but it is very much a practical looking at the world and figuring out, okay, not only are these the things that are happening in the world that are good, bad, whatever, but these are the things that are happening in my life that are good, bad. So in other words, like there's no chance that, like, there's a deeper spirituality that happens when a person acknowledges what is and moves through that, than when a person wraps themselves up in a belief or a practice or whatever to avoid acknowledgement or avoid facing what's really going on. And like I said, like everybody is worried about a different thing. My sister-in-law is not at all worried about, a cashless society where everything is tracked and traced, where there's, robots in your house and smart devices in your house, and your fridge maybe, next time your kids are out of town and you're, having to, making love with your honey on on the kitchen counter or whatever, like it won't bother her that there's cameras in every devices, and, that Alexa's recording it all. It's just like that. There's people out there who aren't affected by that. But, like there is something that, like in her case specifically, like she actually had cancer, and that was something that really woke her up to that deeper aspect of life and helped her to push her forward in a way that helped her to live life and be happy and really take every moment, not take it for granted, but really enjoy every moment.
Right. And as you're saying that, and you were saying how you shortchange yourself, I would say you even shortchange society by not becoming involved, because you were saying how people are afraid of being exposed or exposing these things about themselves. And, something that we forget about that you've sparked my memory when you were saying that is, Dr. Martin Luther King, right? The guy was an adulterer. Like he was he was a reverend, right? He was a reverend, and he was an educated man. He was a doctor and a reverend, and it was known that he had cheated on his wife, right? And it was one of the ways that they tried to bring him down. But if he would have hid, right? If he would have hid in his church or behind his congregation and not come out and led the marches and gave the speeches, where would we be right now as a society? But he realized that, this thing that he was trying to accomplish was bigger than adultery. It was bigger than a mistake that he had made. And I, in many ways, think that that's what made it even more humbling and even more powerful. The message is that, hey, man, this is about forgiveness, and this guy's human, and people make mistakes. But overall, the overarching situation that we have going on right here with racism and separating of the races and all that at the time, it was way more important than him worrying about, losing his congregation or being publicly shamed because he had cheated on his wife. And so, like I was saying, the whole society would have missed out on and been shortchanged had this person hid and not addressed those issues and been afraid, right?
Yeah, that's profound, man. I've as we've talked about in the most recent episodes, I've been laid up with a broken collarbone for the last few weeks, and having a good old time, sitting in bed, working, all that good stuff. And what I've been doing to keep my spirits up and pass the time when I need a break is watching stand-up comedy. And so, of course, I hit up all the Netflix specials and the Chappelle Show. The new episodes of the Chappelle stand-up stuff, and I believe it. I'm pretty sure. Tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it him that talks about Emmett Till?
I don't remember,
but
I did watch this.
I'm pretty sure it's Dave Chappelle. I've watched like hours and hours of stand-up comedy, which has been pretty freaking awesome. But he talks about Emmett Till. This was like in the 60s or 50s. I'm not sure the date, but this 14-year-old kid from Ohio or something went down to Mississippi or somewhere to visit his family. And while he was down there, he supposedly looked at a white woman wrong. And the next day they came and got him from his cousin's house and beat him to a bloody pulp. And his mom came down for the funeral or whatever and insisted that they had an open casket for his funeral because she wanted the world to see what evil can do to a 14-year-old boy, which is pretty fucked up. And so her bravery in that moment inspired and really got like the civil rights movement really started to take root after that, because she was so brave and so courageous in how she handled it that it inspired so many people. Well, Chappelle goes on to talk about how the woman who had accused him of whistling at her or whatever, like right before she died on her deathbed, she told her sister or whatever that she actually had lied in court and that it's not exactly how things went down. And so, in other words, this lady had been keeping this dark secret that caused the death of this boy for her entire life. So she had to live with that reality that she wouldn't face or acknowledge. And so Chappelle's point is that it sounds so academic. He's right. Fucking stand-up comedian, but it's some deep shit. I mean, his point is that, at first he's like, fuck you crazy bitch for not telling the truth or whatever. But then he realizes that things aren't really always black and white. I mean, they're very rarely black and white. And so in her denial to face this truth, it actually set in motion a series of events that did a whole lot more people. It became something so much bigger than the life of just one 14-year-old boy. And so, yeah, man, I think that's what I feel in my heart. That's what I feel like my message is the unification of the reality of the darkness that we're facing and using that as a propulsion to really pull some good and like do some good in this world, man.
Right. Because we're all here. Aren't we all standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us, right? And if none of us had that support, where would we be? And it's something that I've talked about many times. In war, everybody's fighting for the right side. Nobody goes to war because they're like, oh, my country's wrong, and I just want to kill people. So everybody thinks they're on the side of liberty. Everybody thinks, they're on the side of justice. And that's the way people are. And every parent wants their children, like I've talked about that many times in Pakistan and Iran and Iraq and all these countries, Afghanistan. You know what people want to do on the weekend? the same thing we want to do. They want to get together with their friends. They want their kids to have a safe, good school and a nice life. And they want to eat a nice meal, maybe have a beverage or two, and commune with each other. And when we can all get to that point where we all commune with each other, where we all realize, hey, we're all in this thing together, right? You know this very well. If our economy collapses in the United States or in China or in Russia or wherever, dude, that affects everyone everywhere, right? Because, we may not make all these things in the States anymore, but China's going to have a hard time with their economy when all the people in the States can't buy all the Chinese goods that are all made over there anymore, when the iPhone sales go down to zero and people stop, purchasing all that kind of stuff. So,
some would argue that's a good thing, considering the environmental impact of this crazy fucking planned obsolescence that we have built into consumer. That's a whole other tangent. Fuck that. We don't want to go there. Right?
It is. And I was going to say, let's not jump into that. But everything. I think the point to take from this is that everything has an impact, right? Everything has a cause and an effect. Everything is going to. It's going to reestablish itself in one way or another, right? And all we can do, like I said, is we're all standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us, and it's really neat to look at that cycle of life, right? I remember being a child. I remember my parents raising me and the values that they tried to instill in me, and hopefully a few of them stuck. And I know they did, because now I'm trying to establish those in my children, right? With my own truth, right? My own slant on, hey, this thing was really good that my parents taught me, but if you add this to it as well, then it becomes even more powerful. And a great example of that is, be respectful of other people. I always try to teach my children, be respectful of everyone. But at the same time, be humble. You can't command respect from other people like many grown-ups try to do without showing respect to children. You have to be respectful of a child. You can't just berate them and act like they're fools. You have to listen to them so that they listen to you. I mean, that's kind of how it all works. They all kind of go hand in hand. And many times, as people get more educated or older in life and more rigid, they tend to think, I should be respected because of my status or because of my age or whatever. And so anyway, I try to teach my children the whole thing of, listen, like Jordan Peterson's trying to say, I will listen to you, just don't scream at me, right? Like we can have an educated conversation here, but you're not listening to me, right? And you can't make progress that way.
No, and I think that it's something people inherently understand. And so that's why videos of these people screaming and acting, like, you can't even call them children. I mean, my children certainly don't act like that. But I mean, like some of these videos go viral and stuff. And it's interesting too, back to the whole news scene, is that they try to spin like people, they try to spin people and pigeonhole people into, one ideological, box. And the boxes keep getting tinier and tinier and tinier, and they keep coming up with more and more labels to put people into. And now there's the alt-right, and it just gets further and further niched down, and everybody gets segregated into their own little isolated boxes, which is kind of fucked up. But I don't think that's where we came from, and I don't think that's ultimately where we're going. You mentioned standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. I saw a really interesting presentation recently. From an African shaman, talking about the importance of keeping the presence of your ancestors in your life. And it's so rare that people think about that. People are so focused on the now and focused on what's going on in their own lives and whatnot. But this
me. Yeah,
and it's not. I mean, when you say it like that, it has sort of like a derogatory connotation. But I mean, I don't really judge people or fault people for, just being who they are and what we are. I want to see people wake up and become more. I want to help people see the light and find what inspires them and find out, what fears they need to confront and live in that way. But yeah, people are me. I'm me when I need to be as well, and I think that putting the self first is one of the most important ways to make sure that you're able to care for and have positive impacts on other people. But I was really intrigued by this idea of outwardly communicating with your ancestors and calling on them for help and for guidance. One of the points this shaman was making was that, like, things are fucking crazy right now. Things are fractured in so many ways, just like what we're talking about. There's so many different ideas. There's so many different biases. There's so many different agendas at play in our world today, and so it's difficult for people to really feel drawn in a singular direction, like to feel pulled in onto one thing, to feel like they know what it is they're supposed to get out of life and what they're working towards. And so this shaman was really interesting how he talked about the importance of keeping in communication with your ancestors. I mean, very practical, very real conversations. Set up a place in your house where you can have almost like an altar to your grandparents, your great grandparents. Put up the pictures that things that remind you of them, colors and whatnot. Whether it's incense or burn or anything, like real practical can-do things that you can do, and then go to that space. Give yourself some time in that space, so you're bringing your attention, your thought, into these people that you know and who are gone but are still with us in some deep way. And ask them, tell them, say, hey, I'm looking for guidance right now. You've been through all this before. You have all this knowledge. This knowledge goes back way beyond your generation and their generation. You have all of this. Guide me, steer me. And so what's cool is, like, when you do that, the answers appear to you in really interesting ways. They might come in dreams. They might come in just like ideas, moments of inspiration or things like this. So, like, really connecting what's happening in the now to the past.
Well, and when you said that, it reminds me of string theory, right? These are little strings. They're little DNA markers that are absolutely true. They're part of who you are, literally part of who you are. They pass their genes on to you. And like you said, for you and I, we had a couple sets of grandparents that hit their 90s. So think about, at 40, you're 41, I'm 43. Like, dude, together, our age together, we don't even hit where our grandmothers were. So, and so we have so much yet to explore and so much more to understand. And that's one of the things that I think is so cool about life, is the evolution of it. As you get older, like we've talked about before, if you read a book, you go back and read a book that you felt like, for example, The Power of the Now. I probably read that when I was 30. If I went back to read that again now at 42, The Power of the Now is going to take on a whole new meaning for me and significance. And I've done that so many times with Carlos Castaneda books and things like that. And even sometimes I read a book and I'm like, wow, man, I don't know. This is kind of out there, some of the things that I've read, in the past. And I'm like, I've realized that they were necessary at the time. And it was in a time where I hadn't found my truth, right? And I was digging and searching and exploring. And man, you're going to come across all kinds of stuff on your path that some of it's relevant. Like I said, some of it's going to resonate with you, and you grab onto that, you drop it into your life as part of your truth. But it's a constantly evolving and unfolding thing, right? So it's just like nobody knows what it's like to be a parent until you are one, right? And that's why many, many times, parents say their children, act like assholes when they're in their late teens and early 20s, and then all of a sudden in their 30s, they're parents too, and they're like, oh, wow, I realize the patience. I realize the responsibility. I realize what my parents did for me, and they become their friends again. They come back around, and they're like thankful, and they're in gratitude, and they may even be like, yo, Dad, can you help me out with this thing? Like, how'd you handle this when I was acting like that, kind of thing. So it's an amazing experience how it all unfolds.
I need to go back and look up this information again, but I know there were some studies within the recent years that were able to demonstrate how traits or experiences like fear and trauma are carried down from generation to generation. So whether that's through DNA, whether that's through some form of genetics, or whether that's through like the morphic field, that Rupert Sheldrake is champions. However this is, and I think one of the experiments had to do with something with birds and how they were triggered with some sort of response. One generation was some sort of like response to where some loud noise or something that scared them, and then they were able to train this response into the animals, and then a generation later they were able to see this response. So it's almost like they had picked up this instinctual behavior and then transferred it to the next generation through, like I said, genes or genetics or the morphic field or however it was. But man, there's so much going on and so much hustle and bustle in today's world that you forget that you are connected to your ancestors in that way. And so, take somebody who is, like I sense my wife is Polish. Like she grew up in communist Poland and moved to the United States when she was 11. But, if you sit with her parents and, they speak Polish, and if you sit with her parents and talk to them about how they defected from Poland and what life was like for them and for their parents, like you can feel that sense of trauma that her parents experienced during World War II, and it's not just like they'll tell you stories about how their parents were shop owners or whatever in different Polish towns, and the one day the Nazis came in and pulled half the people out in the street and shot them in the head all in the street right in front of their parents, and you could get that sense of trauma. Like there's behavioral patterns that have been passed down on to the grandkids, right? There's ways of looking at the world that have been transferred on from generation to generation.
Well, and there's belief systems there that evolve and self-limiting beliefs as well, right? I know that people. A great example of that is as we're talking about children and families. Think about the things that people have. This is a conversation that you and I actually got into yesterday about parents and their support or lack of support in your dream, right? And what you want to do with your life. And yes, we both decided yesterday that inevitably we're happy with the outcome. And, we met the wives that we have and have the families that we have because we followed a certain path. But that path was skewed or kind of manipulated by our parents because of their fears, right? Like I was telling you how I was watching this really cool show about architecture, and that I always wanted to be an architect when I was a kid, and I thought it was cool. And, my mom got in my ear and was like, "You're a dreamer. I know you think you're going to be designing these cool skyscrapers like in London or New York or something. But the reality is you're just going to make these little tiny boxes. And that's if you can even get a job, or you're going to be designing somebody's swimming pool and, all that kind of stuff." And what's wrong with that is kind of the thing that I think about too. But, at the same time, I could have pursued that anyway, right? I could have gone after what I wanted anyway. And what's funny is you and I both talked about how we kind of got pushed in a direction of this certain course of study by our parents, or just getting a college degree. And now neither one of us used the college degrees that we pursued so rigorously. So at the same time, I don't regret that decision. It's made me a well-rounded person, and I learned a lot and made a lot of friends and had an awesome experience. And there's a lot to be said for just experiential education. But
yes,
it's interesting to think about, though, like we were talking about enabling too, like, enablers and being supportive. What's the difference in being an enabler and being supportive? And it's really funny how people just branch off into different things based on the home life that they have. And that all goes into your ancestry, and it all goes into, like I said, like you were saying, like the fear response of scaring your kids into doing the things you want to do, which I think is that's a tactic that needs to fall by the wayside, and we need to be more supportive of people's dreams.
I keep coming back to this idea of like having a moment of clarity on all this. And the reason I'm saying this, because I've had this urge to tie all this in somehow to plant medicines, because I love talking about that stuff, Jeff. I just love it. Plant medicines. But there's so much to be learned, like in the experience, like I said, the experiential moment of the experiential moments of life, where it's not, you're not necessarily focused on the study of one particular thing. You're having an experience that teaches you something beyond what you could have, sought out. And so, like in the case of plant medicines, like there's so much that can be learned in an instant, you know, and what I like to think of as a moment of clarity. You know, there's so much that can be learned about your past and who you are and where you came from, who your ancestry is, while at the same time, so much clarity can be gained on the ways that you understand the world, the things that you were afraid of, just like we were talking about earlier. Like, what is it in this world that is most drawing you into it, right? Like, what is the thing that draws your attention the most? How do you understand and look at that in a healthy way, right? And so I've had a few of these really big moments where I really understand the connection to the past and understand how that, like, the past actually pushes you forward into creating the life that you're supposed to create for yourself, into being able to fall into alignment with your destiny. And so, we've been kind of talking about this a little bit. And for me, like, this concept of redesigning reality, I've really been, lately just kind of asking myself, like, all right, cool. Well, I'm starting to get comfortable doing this. I'm starting to actually enjoy, like, sitting down and having these chats and getting feedback from people. And it's actually becoming something that's a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. And so what really is the message? What is it? What do we mean by redesigning reality? And it's exactly that. It's facing reality as it is, finding your truth within that, and then finding a healthy way to look at that, and then turning all that into basically living a kick-ass life as a form of revolution against all the crazy shit that's happening. Right.
And also, as you were sitting there talking about the past, I was just talking about The Power of the Now, Eckhart Tolle, by the way. Anybody out there that hasn't read it, I highly recommend it.
I tried to read it. I couldn't do it. I wasn't ready for it.
Right. It's interesting, and it's so true. But something that my kind of spin on that is the past is just an accumulation of now moments, because the past is only happening now, right? Everything that was your past or is your past that you view as your past was a now moment, and the future only exists in the now. So it's kind of interesting that the past and the present and the future only exist right now, because you can only access those memories of the past in your now moment, and you can only project things that you want to do in the future in this current now that you're in. And so I call those things an accumulation of now moments. And that's, to me, what redesigning reality is, right? You take these accumulations of moments that you perceive as past, and you bring them all into this current now. And with that chemical concoction of thoughts and memories and hormones and the dopamine and all these things that are rifling through your body, you can choose. You can make a choice, and it's something that I've talked about on our show, and we're kind of trying to pigeonhole it right now into a definition of what is redesigning reality. But it's pigeonhole. To me, it's about making proper choices, right? And not allowing yourself to. We talked about that in the last episode, I believe, about the peaks and valleys, and not letting the valleys get too deep and not letting the peaks get too high, and finding that balance, but yet elevating yourself over time, right? So instead of doing this thing, you're doing this thing, but in a constant gradual upswing, right? So onward and upward, as we were saying earlier, as we started the show to each other. So to me, that's what redesigning reality is. It's like we were saying, it's finding your truth. It's taking your experience and the experiences of your ancestors, like you were saying, and turning it into something positive, and realizing that personal growth and these achievements and places that you want to go happen when you analyze things and you get squeezed a little bit and the pressure's on. And like you said, you can't just stay in bed. You've been knocking around in bed for a while, and now it's time to go and greet the world and say, hey, here I am with a busted collarbone. What's up?
Wake up, people. Well, that's good, man. I'm glad we're doing this. It's fun too, bro. Why don't we stop here for the day, and then I'll let you pick up here and tell us all the good stuff that you like to say at the end of the show. Unless you got, oh, dude, we didn't talk about the weather. Man, I feel bad we didn't talk about the weather.
We didn't talk about the weather. The weather's good. The weather's good, and And it's a perception as well, because some people love the rain, but some people love sunny days. So it's all good for both. Exactly. So, well, I was just going to say, as usual, you can find us at redesigningsreality.com. Our channel, Redesigning Reality, on YouTube. Go find Dylan at wakingtimes.com, and you can find me at journeytoinnersage.com, and we're on Facebook, and we post regularly on there as well.
Yeah, and check out Jeff's book, Cosmic Wizard: A Journey from Outer Rage to Inner Sage. You can find that on Amazon. And yeah, you'll know that we've made it on YouTube when you start seeing our conversations debunked in real time by professional, hired
Wikipedia
content debunkers.
Yeah.
So when they unleash the army of content debunkers on us, we've made it to the top or on our way. So thank you all sincerely for tuning in. Do all the stuff that you got to do, like there's share buttons and like buttons, and push all that stuff. I know it, like that, doing all the finger.
Subscribe.
I know it's a lot of work for your finger, but yeah, do all that. You're good at it. And thanks for tuning in. Peace.
Yeah. Later.
You've been listening to Redesigning Reality with Jeff Anthony and Dylan Charles.
Tukaboya mokaboya.